Hello, welcome back to another tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can distribute your podcast for absolutely free while also debunking a popular YouTuber's series on how to podcast. At least one thing said in her final episode. Alright, roll that intro. So the YouTuber I want to debunk is Sarah Dietschy, and in her 5th episode of How to Podcast, she answers a question with the following.
Cam Wright asks, how do you get a podcast on the Apple Podcast app? So you have to use a service or an app that distributes your said podcast.
So in her video, she says that you need a distributor or an app to share your podcast to other places, but the way she portrays it is that it sounds like you just need one place to upload that will do all these things for you. That is not true. You just need the correct URLs, which will be linked in the description, for where to publish your podcast URL, and those places will then distribute your podcast for you. It may require creating a few extra accounts, but not that big a deal. Alright, let's start the tutorial. That's right. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to distribute your podcast across different platforms, but I'm not talking video podcasts. I just have this as a starting page and as a shameless self-promotion, sort of. We're going to move on. So I help run my church's sermon situation. In this case, I'm going to call it podcast since that's the topic of this video. We use Podbean to upload our podcasts. But there are many other platforms out there, and it doesn't matter what platform you use, all these rules should still apply. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, I'm going to log into Podbean. I've already done so, and from here, I'm going to get my podcast's URL, which is right here. I'm just going to highlight it, copy that. And you would do this with whatever podcast hosting platform you're using. You might use Anchor, in which case you would just copy the URL from Anchor. Since you cannot distribute to Anchor, they are a upload platform. But anyway, we're now going to start with iTunes/Overcast. And I'm putting these into the same category for a reason that you'll soon see. First things first, you'll want to go to podcastconnect.apple.com. You'll need to log into your Apple ID, but just a note that you will need to use the same Apple ID that is logged into iTunes on your computer before you can log into your iTunes Connect on your web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and use that ID. Then it will give you a code to sign in with, and then we can trust this browser. Then it will give you this page, and then this is where you would copy paste your URL, and then you'll hit validate, and then you should be good to go. I'm not going to hit validate because I've already submitted this podcast from a different email. Now it'll take a couple days for your podcast to show up on iTunes, just be patient, but then once it's submitted on Apple, it will take another 2 to 3 days to be submitted to Overcast. We're now going to move on to Google Podcasts. You'll need to go to g.co/podcast portal. I'm going to sign in. Then you'll hit publish. Then agree to the terms of service. Then once again, you will copy paste your RSS feed from your podcast host, and then you'll hit submit RSS feed. And again, I'm not going to actually do this because again, I have it submitted underneath a different email. Once it's submitted, it will take another couple days for it to finally go through, and Google will send you an email saying your podcast has been submitted. Ultimately, submitting podcasts to other places is not hard. You just have to know where, and I will link all the URLs that I've gone to in the description below in case you worry. Next up on the chopping block is TuneIn. And for this, you'll go to tunein.com/podcasters, which you can find that link at the bottom of TuneIn's website, and you'll just click podcasters, and then you'll click publish podcast. And here will also take a little bit of waiting, but not long. You'll basically fill out this form. You'll put in your email address, your podcast title, your host name, your hosting, put in your podcast's RSS feed, and just fill out the necessary information. And then if you ever need to update any information, you can do so via the update podcast page. When I did this, it didn't take very long for them to send me an email, maybe a day or two or less, and then they gave me a URL, and then I linked it to the appropriate website. Next up is Spotify. And for this, you'll go to podcasters.spotify.com. You'll need an active Spotify account. You'll need to log in. Then you'll get a page that looks like this. And then you can click Get Started. Continue. And then you'll put in your RSS feed, add podcast info, and voila. Another way to get your podcast to Spotify if you are using Podbean is to go to your settings and go to social share and just connect to a Spotify account and then follow the instructions from there. That basically concludes Spotify. Next up is Stitcher. What you'll want to do is go to stitcher.com/content providers. Otherwise, you can go to stitcher.com and click the link at the bottom of the website and just click partner sign up. And then you will fill in your information. You'll put in your provider name and email. You'll create a password and confirm that password. And then once you are able to have an account, or once you're in, then you can come up and click add shows. And then you can put in the show name, the RSS feed, the language, choose a category for it, choose number of listeners, add a Twitter handle, add a Facebook page, basically provide any extra information that's for your podcast that Stitcher can put on your podcast page. And then you'll agree to the terms of service and hit continue. And then shouldn't take very long before it shows up on Stitcher. And then last but not least is where we began, Podbean. So if, say, you use Anchor to upload your podcast to, then you can go to Podbean, and at the bottom of their website, there is a link to submit your podcast, which is where I am. You'll put in your podcast feed URL, tell them that you are not a robot, hit submit, and follow any further instructions they have, and that goes for all the other platforms that I've shown. Once you have submitted your URL, then you will follow any instructions that the podcast provider gives you. So I know that was a fast tutorial, but that covers all your bases of where people commonly listen to podcasts, and it allows you to get your podcast easily distributed across multiple platforms so that a variety of people can listen to it wherever they listen to podcasts the most. So, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can give it a big thumbs up. You can click right over here to subscribe to the respective channels, and you can click right over here to see my previous video. And as always, I'll see you in the next tutorial.